Welcome to Talking in Stations. Today is Wednesday the 18th. I'm Rich Richmond, your host, with Xiao Shen from Army of Mangoes.
Hello, hello.
The main meal of tonight, the meat and potatoes, the monthly economic report. But before every great meal is the appetizer. And tonight's appetizer is a nice Nullsec fight that happened in a system I used to call home. HHQ, Esoteria. Moving on to the battle report. It is a rather large fight between the now newly baptized PIBC of Evictus, Vindictive, and Army of Mango, along with their apparently new allies, Dreadbomb, the Rogue Consortium. I believe Spades Alliance is an associate of Evictus, to my knowledge. And they had a massive fight against Fraternity Fast Kick, which I believe is a Red Alliance super dropping group, or somewhat associated with them. Ferrata Victrix of, Stain. Some of Fraternity's vassals like Lord of Worlds, Blades of Grass, other residents of Stain, and a small delegation from the Goonswarm Federation. Shen, I hear you were in this fight. What happened here?
So this is over an armor timer of an Athenor in HHQ. So basically, armor timer came out, and then both sides decided to have a big fight.
An armor timer. And I'm seeing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 supers dead here, and probably more
5 super
that were
dead.
Five supers that were dead.
So one got away.
They brought supers to bash to kill an Athenor.
It was a counter drop against our capital fleet, as far as I know, because I was in the sub capital fleet and I had no idea how the capital fleet functioned this time. I don't know who dropped in first and who dropped in later on. But overall, we started with, I think, us coming in with a Munion fleet. And I think they responded with a Gila fleet from Farah and another Munion fleet from Frat. And we're basically Winterco as a whole, because you see Lords and Blaze of Grass. And we basically started engaging, and so the Gila fleet was basically in the range of the Athenor and sending their drones to assist the Frat fleet. But we had 2 Rorks, which worked really well as smart bombings. And the Munion fleet basically got slaughtered pretty hard by us. Yeah.
Now,
if you look at it, the Frat basically lost their entire Munion fleet right now. Well, in this fight,
15 billion
so
worth of munions.
59 brought in, 59 lost. That's the entire fleet that they brought in.
And how about these supers? You got a lot of support from, Dreadbomb. They lived up to their name. They brought a massive, massive Dreadbomb.
Yeah. So I think we're kind of expecting they were going to drop supers. So basically counter dropped a bunch more dreads to basically vaporize those supers in some sense.
Now, I'm looking at the one of these supers. I think it's this one. What happened here? Why Vindictive is meant to be, their friends, your friend. This is a Vindictive revelation right here that's been brought down by, Dreadbomb.
It's a standing issue. I think Dreadbomb and Vindictive didn't set each other to blue, but they were meant to. So yeah, it was a standing issue.
Standing issue. Hopefully, I mean, this isn't going to happen again, is it? No? Oh, well,
we'll see.
We'll see. I'm surprised that they didn't call it out. There wasn't better communication to stop something like this happening.
I think with the amount of dreads that Dreadbomb brought in, it was kind of quick to vaporize those dreads, so it was maybe too late. Yeah.
I see. Do you have any idea how these supers were caught? Were they surprise bubbled? Or what?
I think they were signaled in right at the place where we were expecting them. I think we saw their Arazu or Rapier, one of the two. And we saw them, and then basically we let up signal basically right beside that signal, and then right close with like say how many 60 dreads, you're not gonna survive that with the super.
I see. Is there anything else you'd like to mention about this battle report? Otherwise, to me, it looks like a pretty straightforward fight. One side outpredicted the other, and one side outnumbered the other.
I mean, the number is not really outnumbering. I think if you look at the number, I think the number difference should not exceed 100. It's just in terms of number, it was not outnumbered that much. It's not like doubling like the fight you have between Frat and Snuffed Out, where it's like doubling, sometimes like more than doubling their numbers. But for us, this is kind of even fight in terms of numbers.
Come on, don't make me pull out the
numbers. No, they're not the same.
Come on, don't make me pull out the ship composition. 48 nightmares. Where on? I'm surprised people still use the nightmares, especially after scarcity and.
That's Dread Bomb. That's Dread Bomb fleet. If you look at it.
Oh. I'm surprised people are still using
just
nightmares.
One thing, the objective was completed, so the Athenor in Hull.
Oh, that Athenor is now in Hull. Well, they achieved their objective, but at what cost? 5 super capitals. I wonder if they're going to return for that to Athenor.
So it's our Athenor. No, it's their Athenor. We're coming to reinforce them. So their Athenor is in Hull right now.
Oh, I see. It's their Athenor. So it was a double victory for you. You achieved the time and the battle. I presume for the whole there's not going to be much resistance.
4 times. We don't know. We'll see. Maybe they're going to bring 10 supers into 5. Who knows?
And, well, I'm guessing Fulcrum FC this one. I think I recognize his account there.
In subcapital, yes. But in capital fight, I don't think he was there. I think he was just focusing on the subcapital side.
I see. On one side, would technically this side was meant to be PIBC, which consists of Spades Alliance, which is associated with Victus. Another Mangoes and Vindictive are both on the side of PIBC, and on the fighting alongside them would be Dreadbomb and Rogue Consortium, which are part of the Wrecking Crew Coalition. On the other side, we have Winter Coalition and their vassals. That would be Fraternity leading it, along with Lord of Worlds, Blades of Grass, Destiny Call, and Literally Triggered and Sons of Bane, a few others. Then we have Fast Kick, which I think is associated with Red Alliance, and by extension that would be the Imperium. And Ferrata Victrix, Good Sax, and some of the others, that would be, I guess, Stain Residents. So it's 2 coalitions on the Dreadbomb, Evictus, Mango side, fighting against around 3 or so coalitions, forming up some sort of fleet on the Ferrata side.
Yeah. So I'll mention 2 things. One thing is when we're killing those Munings, from Frat, it was really fun. It was kind of slaughtering. We had enough Munings, I think, almost one-shot them. Another thing is, so this shows that timers such as structure timers and iHub and TCU timers are great sources for fights like this. So a lot of times in Nullsec, you see fights accumulates with those timers. The advantage of those timers is that you can prepare, you can backphone, so fights can get very big very quickly in terms of numbers. Something like initial reinforcement of structures or initial intoses of iHub timer, iHub nodes and stuff like that, are not really that exciting because it's kind of like flash form, and it's always better. I mean, it depends on group, but generally speaking, it's always you can get better numbers if you have backphoned or be prepared beforehand.
I see. Looking at this battle report, Noraus is here in a smart bombing practice. What happened here? This looks like a firewall practice to me.
That's a
Do you have
great
any
question
idea?
to him. No, I have no
Well,
idea. We just saw practice, and they were kind of far away. It was not around our fleet, so it's kind of like, yeah. Well, I
well.
think he was meant to kill those drones that we put on the structure, but I don't know how
Oh,
much he succeeded.
I see, I see. Now, this number fraternity, they are living all the way on the other side of the universe right now. How do they get here?
I think it's through wormhole, but it can be something else.
All right. But, is there anything else to this battle?
I think that's all. Yeah.
All right. Shall we move on to get ready to move on to the monthly economic report? But first, a commercial.
HighSec BuyBack offers 90% JITA anywhere in HighSec. Simply go to highsec.evebuyback.com, appraise your items, create a contract, and get paid quickly.
And we're back with the monthly economic report. Savad is with us to discuss, well, what's been happening with the economy in July. It is now August.
How's it going?
It's going well, and well, I don't feel like opening up the raw data reports right now, so we'll go purely based on the, well, what I'll be broadcasting on stream and what I can open up on from the CCP website. We'll start off with production versus destruction. We can see that the mining has, well, since the drop, it's starting to even up. Maybe picking up a tiny bit, but nothing impressive. However, things being destroyed and things being produced are actually quite high. But obviously, what's being
So
mined is
maybe
still
this
stuff.
is where we can get into the. So maybe this is where we can get into the question of, is this just purely from CCP stimulus, or is this a sign of recovery of the economics in Eve? Because we knew that from the Grand Heist, I think, update, they brought in a lot of ISK into the game, right? So maybe this is part of that. Maybe part of that is just pure recovery.
So I think we have to look at go back at least 3 months to understand what's been happening with EVE Online's economy. In May and June, things were quite bad, as the last MER showed, and I think as most of us realized from playing the game. And there were a number of factors behind that, right? There was the summer slump, there was the easing of COVID restrictions, there was the industry blueprints overhaul, right? That made a lot of core ships more expensive. So you had a lot of factors kind of depressing the economy. And if some of those factors lift, you'll get a partial recovery, right? So if you had logged off of EVE Online in May because the sun was out and because there were things you could do again, you've probably taken a couple walks around the block by now. You've gotten reacquainted with some old places. You've probably gotten a little bit of that out of your system, and you're back to the game. So that is probably less of a factor in the partial recovery that we've been seeing. The summer slump doesn't seem to be as bad. Excuse me. Now that we're heading towards the close of summer, the war is over. People had to resub to get their caps out of Delve, right? Even if you didn't resub in order to fight for the final assault, you surely resubbed in order to get your stuff out. So you have a number of the factors that have been pushing down on the economy, that were pushing down on it in May and June, have been lifted in July, and you can see that partial recovery in the MER. The stimulus helped too. The thing with the stimulus, though, is that it's a short-term effect. It's like a drug. You got to keep doing it if you want to keep getting the effect. So it's a partial solution. It's a Band-Aid, as a lot of people were saying at the time. I still think it was a good idea because, if you've got a wound, It's like there's no sense saying, well, don't put a bandage on it. You have to heal the wound. Well, okay, sure. But first you have to put a bandage on it, right? You need those short-term solutions in order to stabilize the situation. And then you can get the fundamental changes that you need. So the stimulus was a Band-Aid. It was a short-term fix, and the effects are wearing off. So you're starting to see a bit of a slowdown now.
Well, on the topic of the stimulus, they actually added something in to allow you to calculate the stimulus. This right here, redeemed ISK token. That, basing on the straight line and then suddenly the spike up, that would be our stimulus.
Yeah,
so if we look at this,
you can see it in the money supply and velocity of ISK too.
So if we look at Redeem ISK token, we look at that, and then we scroll all the way over to here, we can see the stimulus to the economy was somewhere in the region of, well, daily. Somewhere in the region of 1 point something trillion ISK daily forfeited through the stimulus.
Yeah, so we can also see why some people were worrying about this kind of stimulus into the economy, right? We see that it's way above bounty price, is a lot above the commodity market as well. So it's a big chunk of money putting into the game at once for free, basically. Nobody needs to do anything besides logging in for that 7 days in order to get those money.
Yeah, I think it could be a problem if they keep doing it. You know, if you 3 and 4 times or 3 or 4 months after a row, you could see some pretty bad distortions from all that ISK entering the game. But you can see in the velocity of ISK chart that, yeah, it's gone up, but it wasn't even a full recovery back to where it was in April and March, right? It's maybe a third of the way back to where it was. I mean, the economy in May and June was really in a precarious state. It was quite bad, and so some short-term emergency measures I think was appropriate. It's like if somebody's having a heart attack, you give them a shot of adrenaline or something like that just to jolt them back into functioning. That's not a problem. Of course, you keep doing it, that could be a problem, right?
Well, I have to say, on the topic of the economy, the economy in May was one of the few times ever since around November time, that the economy has seen more mining than actual destruction being done. But it was only for a brief period between mid-April to around just the start of July where the destruction went up to more than the amount of minerals being mined.
Yeah, not sure I have an explanation for that.
Well, we did skip over a few of the charts just to look at the recent ISK faucet. We heard your complaints, we're going to give you 235 mil, and we're going to tell you to go away. So let's take a look at those charts. The destroyed ISK by value, by region.
Before we start that, Pedro, I have a question. Do you think this is going to drive people's expectation of this kind of events happening in the future, or do you think people are going to expect this going to be a one-time thing?
Well, right now it's just a one-time thing, right? Because they've only done it one time. But if you do it a second time, especially close on the heels of the first time, then you could start building up that expectation. I mean, I think that the economy in EVE is one of the main reasons that people play it. I know we don't talk about it as much as PvP, and it's just not as conflict driven, but it's important, and it relies on a smaller number of people to remain functioning. because there are like critical breakpoints, right? Like if you're just doing market stuff casually, you probably just sit in JITA and you don't go anywhere else, right? But if there are also people who are very serious and dedicated traders who are also in JITA. But more casual traders will tend to stay in just one place. But goods have to get out to the rest of the game somehow when most of the production is happening in JITA, right? So if some of those people stop doing what they're doing, then the price of your minerals could be whatever in JITA, but if you can't get it in outer passage, it doesn't help you, right? So yeah, it could create an expectation if they just keep doing it. The main thing is to get the economy back on a sound footing, and that requires structural changes to the ecology. There needs to be more value in space, more incentive for people to be out there. Then when the more like the herbivore players go out into space, then the predators will come out and hunt them, and then you get other predators hunting those predators, and that you kind of restart that whole ecology. But everything depends on those more herbivorous players, right, to get started. And that's going to be CCP's challenge, putting enough value in space to incentivize them to get out there and drive that content for the other players without returning to the age of, already replaced and infinite work walls.
I do agree with that. I've seen more players head towards abyssals. I've seen more people head towards incursions, particularly in HighSec, and it's a little sad to see it, but because of that, I've seen a rise in, I guess, ganking going on.
The problem with abyssals is that once players are in there, they're invulnerable, right? I mean, assuming they've mastered the PvE, there's no way to interact with them until they come out the other side. I guess people could sit out there and try to gank these really expensive ships, but for whatever reason, they don't. Not in sufficient volume to. I know some people do, but I look at the big kills on Zkill every day, and I'm not seeing like 10 billion Esquilas day after day after day the way I do freighters and stuff like that. It happens, but it's not as much as. It's basically this PvE is siloed off from the rest of the ecology, right? That's the problem with that value coming out of it. When an industrial player or a trader or a miner, whoever gets out there into space in their little Terra or their Coveter or whatever, and they're out there trying to get that value, they're not just creating content for themselves. They're doing it for the players who log in to hunt them, right? For the players who log in to protect them, right? It's not just the people who try to go get the roar call. It's also the people who are there to respond to the fleet that tried to attack it, right? It all depends on getting that original kind of herbivorous PvE player out there where in a kind of a dangerous situation. And that's the challenge.
But don't you think that's the whole point of having Abyssal, right? So having a place of safety where people can just come in and just, let's say they have half hour today or 40 minutes today, they can just run 2 Abyssals and then you can log off. Right, I think it provides an option for a lot of players who just want to come in, not spend that much time in EVE, just basically doing a daily thing.
Well, you leave one wolf alive and the sheep are never safe, and then they all huddle into one area, even if it makes them very little risk, even if they are making scraps. As long as it's little to no risk, they'll huddle there.
Yeah, that's right. The problem with let me put it another way. The problem with abyssals isn't that they exist or that people can have this content. That to me is unobjectionable. The problem is when it's people look at it as their main way of getting their ISK, and they see that, they look at all the other options around and say abyssals are the place to go to make your ISK, because that's putting the highest reward activities or a very high reward activity in a very safe area. The risks that you endure should be rewarded, right? It should be higher risk activities give you higher reward for, higher value ore or more ISK or higher value loot or whatever. You should get more value for putting more risk in, putting more assets in play or at risk. But in the Abyss, as long as you've got the program down for the Abyss, you're not going to get caught, probably.
So when you're talking about risk here, are you only referring to the PvP risk, or the PvE risk? Because Abyssal is one of the most dangerous PvE activity you can do, or higher tier. Abyss is one of the most dangerous activity you can do in EVE right now.
I'm referring primarily to the PvP. Even if we say that that the PvE is just as dangerous as the PvP, which I'm not sure it is, but even if we conceded that it would still just be that players putting their assets at risk without providing content for anyone else. It's just the little droids in the game that are killing them, right? What an ecology requires is interaction between the people who are there, not to be siloed off into separate little areas. Because then the person who never mines or never does PvE or whatever, they log on and they see that guy out in space. They say, okay, I'm going to give CCP some more money so I can buy a better ship, or I'm going to found my own corp. We're going to call it Exterminate All Rorquals. We're going to drive that content, create more in-game activity, and it has all these knock-on effects for everybody else in the game.
But let's say
if you silo off players into their own little area. What's that?
So the loot that you get, let's say from Abyssal, that is commodity, right? So that means you have to transport them to a DD station to sell them, right? So that is to some degree the PvP part or the risk part that will be involved in Abyssal running.
So that's improvement. Oh, go ahead, Rich.
Shen, when transporting commodities into somewhere for redemption, there is, in my humble experience so far, no risk. Yeah, you would really have to, I guess, shut down to put yourself at risk in terms of redeeming these commodities.
Well, some players are going to get caught. Some people are going to make mistakes. So there is some risk in that sense, but I wouldn't say that there's no risk, but there's certainly not as much risk as if you're running a ratting anomaly in Nullsec, right, with your super carrier or something like that, and a 50-man Kiki fleet can drop on you at any time. It's not enough risk. It's an improvement, though, over direct cash payouts like we used to have, right? Because, that was just money in the bank. There's no way to interrupt that. So it's good, it's progress, but siloing yourself off into one small area where you're basically untouchable by other players, except for the 5 or 6 seconds you exit the abyss, is not creating value for other people in the game. It's only creating value for you. And so that's a design problem, I think. Okay. Yeah, so the PvE is quite dangerous. I don't want to downplay that, especially if you're doing like the tier 5s and the 6s, which are, I'm not an Abyssal runner, so I don't want to, go into too many specifics, but I'd had enough at tier 2, it's like, I'm going to lose like 4 or 5 cruisers trying to figure this thing out, and not cheap cruisers either, so, I didn't want to press on with that. The PvE is quite dangerous, but it's still just you interacting with the program, where what the interest of EVE is players interacting with each other. So the fact that you have to transport that red loot around is an opportunity for interaction, and that's good, but in my view, it's not enough from a design perspective.
Well, we have seen the Overseer personal effects and the Triglavian data items go up in terms of them as a faucet for money. The same with sleeper components. And on the topic of sleeper components, I might have a very small hand in this, and I'll go ahead and mention this. The way I get money is I get sent some nice gifts from old friends that I helped rat, because nobody else would rat with them, and I would. And eventually they ratted more and more. They went from 1 account to 2 account to 5 accounts, and now they have 50 accounts. And they might be responsible for this huge increase in sleeper opponents recently, as well as Nullsec going into wormholes, because it's the only thing that makes money these days. But as for wormholes, I like wormholes because as we said, it interacts with players. But with faucets aside, shall we move on to the destruction by region?
Let me just say about wormholes that I think it's fine for there to be a lot of value coming out of there because it's dangerous space. But currently, at least from talking to wormholers, there aren't very many people actually living there, and I guess the area is controlled by what Hard Knocks and Laser Hawks have pretty much wrapped things up, right? I mean, they're not every group in there, but pretty much top dogs, right? I mean, am I wrong?
Something of the sort.
Okay, so if they put out 3 or 4 dreadnoughts to go wipe out the drifters, who's going to stop them? Right?
Shen?
I mean, with things we're saying, like running Abyssal is right now very safe and very lucrative. Going into a lot of Nullsec people going to Wormhole because of it's safe and makes a lot of ISK. So do you think there should be an overhaul of Nullsec anomalies, let's say, or some sort of addition or modification to the Nullsec way of making ISK now?
I think so. Hunting a Nullsec sucks.
Yeah, that's that knock-on effect, right? Nobody out there to go get.
Yeah, but I think making it more. But I think making it safer and more lucrative, so people will return to those playstyle instead of going to somewhere else.
Yeah. You make it more lucrative. You put more value in space. Then somebody puts out their work wall to go get that value, and then the next time Rich and his buddies undock to go get that guy, they find him there instead of having to gate around 30 systems without running into anything.
Well, speaking of gating around 30 systems, total value destroyed by region. Boy, does this suck. We're looking at Lone Trek, the Citadel, Forge, Delve, and Veil of the Silent. That is 5 out of however many there are here. I really don't want to count these right now.
So, okay, just going back to the point that we were making earlier with writing or just writing Nullsec in general, I think that goes back to something I think I said before, which is the more lucrative and the safer you make Nullsec to be, the more people will come out to rat. Which means that there'll be more activities, more praise. That means there'll be more praise for the hunter as well. So I think when CCP starts to make this more lucrative and more rewarding for players, I think we're going to see a lot of players returning both for PvE and PvP purposes.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, take a look here. This is the NPC bounties by region, and we have at the top 2, the top ones, Veil of the Silent, the Kalevala Expanse, Innsmother, Tino, Esoteria, Tribute, Branch, Oasa, and then just teases off. At that point it teases off. Well, it pays to be a winner. Guess who controls Veil and Kalevala Expanse?
Well, Kalevala Expanse, of course, is controlled by Horde, and Veil is controlled by Fraternity, so, people are crabbing up a storm. I mean, what else are you going to do? The war is over, and everybody's poor, so...
That is NPC bounties. So people are still ratting in Nullsec, though I think, the majority... Oof, look at that bar. Look at that bar, and then look at the second bar. Veil of the Silent is really ratting up a storm compared to the others.
I think a lot of times groups learn from defeat, right? They come back more determined, stronger. When Goons got kicked out of the north, they went down to Delve and they crabbed up a storm. They built this industrial juggernaut, and they were able to prevail in the recent conflict, partly as a result of that. When Fraternity got, I forget what region exactly they were living in, but when they were defeated by Legacy in the Winter War, they went up north, and now you see they're running the charts here with their crabbing numbers. Maybe Test and Brave will follow that same path, and come back stronger than ever. I wouldn't write them off just yet.
I'm a bit worried for Brave because moving into Geminate, they lost a good number of staff and a good number of players from what I've seen. A few groups have actually looked towards Horde and Winterco. But, Fraternity has gotten a lot stronger if we look at these charts. With the mining chart, Veil of the Silent, right there. toppling even Domain and the Forge.
Yeah, well, it's hard to do much mining in Delve, but Domain and Forge are typically the seed of mining in HighSec, and then you have Metropolis has also been a real winner recently. That wasn't always the case. That's been a surge over the last, 6 or 7 months. And if you're not a HighSec miner, that might be a little bit surprising, but I think that the reason is because of the way that the redistribution landed, right? You get it used to be that you would find how to put this. So after the redistribution, you get plagioclase in Minmatar space and Caldari space, and you get pyroxeres in you get plagioclase in Minmatar space, and in Galenti space, you get pyroxeres in Caldari and Amar space. But plagioclase is more valuable per cubic meter than pyroxeres, and it spawns in rocks about 3 times as large. So it's just, if you're mining in HighSec, you're just going to have an easier time doing it in Minmatar or Galenti space, and Metropolis is a really large region. So I think that helps explain the surge in mining value in Metropolis. I mean, Forge and Domain are pretty self-explanatory. People want to be next to the big markets. And Domain is a huge region. Forge is not nearly as big, but it has a lot of yellow space, and of course you're right next to Cheetah.
Oh, well, speaking of somewhere close to Minmatar space, what is this? Heimatar. There is a 14.5 trillion-isk import, and its, how do I say it, its exports is nil. Somebody's been doing something in Heimatar.
See.
They've moved in 14.5 trillion worth of imports, but exported nothing else out.
You have to give me a moment to find this graph here, but
Take a look at my stream.
okay. Yeah, a lot of times I just don't believe that people brought 15 trillion ISK worth of goods to Heck and Rens in that month. Like, that's clearly not the explanation. Probably a big fleet movement. That Metropolis and Heimatar both have faction war areas, but Heimatar especially, Amamake, one of the main small gang PvP arenas in the game, is like 3 or 4 jumps south of Rens. So it could be related to that somehow. Still, that's a lot of value. I don't know. Maybe there was a big fleet move through there, but then you would see it in the neighboring regions too. And there's nothing really close to Heimatar, is there? Are we looking at just the top areas?
We do have the knowledge. This is a faction warfare space, right? And this is net export and net import, so they are not raw import and raw exports. So it means that there will be, I think, a giant fleet or fleets moving into there and not coming out.
Oh, I've been rused.
Maybe.
Okay, forget about this number then. But for the rest of the numbers, production. We'll have to forget these numbers because this means this could be anything. This could be somebody moving a bunch of ore from one area to another. This could be an incursion fleet that's just traveling exclusively on HighSec and stayed in there for a certain amount of time. This could be somebody moving around a lot of assets. Hell, if somebody wants to chuck around a few supers and move them around just to mess with the monthly economic report, technically speaking, if you had enough money worth of assets, you could do that.
So the import-export figures are a result of just people moving assets back and forth between stargates, right? So every time you move, let's say you move a battleship worth 200 million ISK, out of Heimatar into Metropolis, then Metropolis shows an import plus 200 million, and Heimatar shows an export minus 200 million. And if you move that battleship back across that same gate, then you've canceled it out, and the dynamic has gone in the other side. So when a very large fleet moves, that will show up on the import-export values, and that's why these numbers are not very good indicators of trade. They're good indicators of movement of assets, but for what purpose? Hard to say. The issue with explaining it by invoking a large fleet movement is, first of all, 15 trillion ISK, 14.5. That's really a lot. I mean, Keepstar is 150 billion, right? So that is a huge amount of value. The other problem with that is that if you explain the imports to Heimatar using that figure, then by the logic we just explained, you should also see that same value somewhere else as the exports, right? Where you would see a large spike in exports from somewhere else, not necessarily the same value, but it would be noticeable.
Well, yeah. Keep in mind, we see that the only systems that have exports, decent exports, are usually is places like Delve, Corazor, Derelict. These places are just...
Yeah, so Derelict connects to Heimatar, and that's a highway for capital and super capital ships moving from north to south and back again. That's possible. There is some Nullsec in Heimatar that they might move through. I'm not an expert on fleet logistics, so I don't want to get ahead of myself there. That's a possibility. Delve is nowhere near Heimatar. Lone Trek is nowhere near. Can you scroll down again, Rich? Corazor is nowhere close. I mean, I don't know. I don't really have a good explanation.
If they're crap numbers, then let's move off it. We've looked at the destroyed value by location, by region. We looked at the mining value, the NPC bounties. What haven't we looked at? Production? Looks fairly straightforward. The top producers.
So we see Delph right there in second place. Well, we have to remember this is July's economic update, which means that this happened right before the retreat announcement was happened. So that means people were kind of building up, right, from both sides to be prepped for the final assault that were announced by Pappy leaders.
What final assault, huh? So, this will be before the evacuation. We should probably wait next month's MER to see, well, how Delve's production is after the retreat. The Fortune, the Citadel, and Lone Trek are still high as ever. Veil of Silent is on par with Fate. Veil of Silent is on par with Fade. Who lives in Fade? Volta. Fade is the smallest Nullsec region by a number of systems. What are Volta doing in Fade that is putting them, well, allowing them to nip at the toes of Veil of the Silent in terms of production?
Didn't they start
I think for Veil of the Silent,
a new bro group like We Form Blob? Isn't that their
They've picked up some new groups, but I can't believe... I will refuse to believe that they've been able to have production output that would match Veil of the Silent. I'm struggling to believe that.
also with Veil of Silent, I think a lot of mining values, as we've seen in the mining chart, that it was so Veil was the first, right, in the mining chart. But I think a lot of that went into Forge because they're so close to each other. So maybe people transport their stuff to Forge and then build there, since it's so close to Trade Hub.
That does make sense. And with the Ojinan Keepstar project going on, that is going to make Forge production values... will it affect that?
Well, it depends on what they use that area for. If they set up you can build capitals in Nullsec, right? If they so if they set that up, then a lot of people want to get into the capital ship construction game. I used to see this on the forums all the time. Somebody would post in the newbie area, okay, I bought my super carrier blueprint copy, now what? Because they want to do the big thing right away. Problem is that, well, there are a lot of problems with that. One of them is not having access to the facilities, right? So you open up a public access area for that sort of thing, even in low security space, and yeah, people are gonna use it, and you should see that. Well, so much stuff is already being built in the Forge anyway that it might not make a huge difference, but for sure people will use it. Well, yeah. So go ahead, Shao.
So for supers, you need something called the super production array, I think, or super construction array in Nullsec. That's an iHub upgrade that you can put onto your iHub in Nullsec. But I think in lowsec you're able to produce capitals, but not super capitals.
Yeah, so people would say, well, all right, I'll build myself a dreadnought and, I'll work my way up. After I've done the baby stuff, then I'll build my super carriers and titans and stuff like that, right? And a lot of people do have this mentality. You can see it on the EVE Online official forums. If you go into the newbie area, you see people post these questions like, all right, where do I build my capital ship? And they're like 4 months old players.
Well, I believe Shen here is an Iron Man. He mines and builds everything himself, if I remember. He's somebody that's just like that.
That used to be the case before the whole scarcity, to be honest. After scarcity hit, I think last October-ish, I think that one hit the most, where you split the rocks into like HighSec rocks and low-sec ores and then null-sec ores. That really hit and basically stopped right after that.
Oh,
but
I did notice
it was one capital and one Orca.
I want to pull us back to one of the charts. I did notice something really curious. Look at this. Transaction tax. Look at that spike down. Whoo! What happened here? Well, we all know what happened here. The TTT and the tax break CCP has given us, which sort of collapsed the war front in Delve.
Yeah, it tracks the velocity of ISK figure, right? I mean, CCP wanted to inject some life into the economy and get that ISK and that value moving again. They succeeded. So you see velocity of ISK goes up. Well, if I'm placing orders, then I'm modifying orders. Your transaction tax is going up. Part of that might be that, remember, it wasn't just the price to list an order that was slashed in the tax holiday they announced. It was also the price to relist, like to adjust your price, right? So let's say that before I would place my order and just leave it alone, or maybe adjust once a month, but now it costs so much less for me to reduce it. Maybe I check that once every couple days, maybe once a day, depending on how active
we have to remember it's the tick going up. That means it's smaller. It's less transaction.
Oh yeah. To the viewers at home.
So the zero line is the line, the gray line that you see in the middle. So further up, that's positive. That means more is being gained through the players and into the game. The lower below that line is negative. So that means it's coming out of the game. So that means we're seeing a reduction in transaction tax. I think that's really on point with the Grand Heist, where they reduce the transaction tax, I think, from I think 2.5% without any standing to 1.12%, 1.125% without standing in NPC space.
So yeah, either tilt or just try to imagine it flipped. That going down means less tax. That does not mean that pointing up. Yeah, it's a mirror dimension.
Oh, it was a good theory.
I could flip
Beautiful
this.
theory destroyed by ugly facts.
Well, keep on talking. I'll try to flip this image for everyone.
And if you look at it, it's about the same as the blue line, right? So that means the reduction transaction tax happened right around the same time where the redeemed is token was going skyrocketed, right? With that blue dark blue line going up, up, up. So also we have seen like something we've seen very steadily, right? We have seen the agent mission rewards is very steadily skill point purchase. So generally speaking, or traditionally speaking, with blueprints, skill purchases, broker fees, and LP store, those things tend to be very steady with the amount of ISK either flowing in or flowing out. So the two spikes for the blueprints that are spiked down, which means that people spend a lot of ISK on those blueprints. I think one is the blueprint for the new industrial items that were introduced during the big industrial change. I think another one would be, I think later on, so that there's a pre-patch and there's a formal patch that happened, I think within a month.
So the transaction tax went down. All right. Yeah, there's something else on the economic report that I want to talk about briefly, and that's the mineral price index. You can see that was way down in, well, there was that big surge in capital and super capital ship construction. In April, it had to fall from that, but it settled significantly down from where it had been before, right? So the index was about 260 in December, and into February, then it spiked to about 330 during the rush to build capital and super capital ships before the new blueprint changes hit, and then it settled in April to about 240, and then in May and June down to about 220, and now it's back. It's climbing back up to about 230. So that's a good indicator of demand. Of course, minerals are not as important to the economy as they used to be, since capital and super capital ships are no longer made entirely out of minerals, battleships as well. But there's still an awful lot of things that require some minerals, and they're still probably they're probably the single biggest input to the entire industrial ecology of Eve. So that upward trend line indicates more production, more demand, presumably also higher levels of player engagement. However, as the economy starts to slow down, the effects of the stimulus wear off, that number could be down modestly in the next monthly economic report.
Well, this also goes back to the, I think, first questions that I brought up. Do you think this is, again, a stimulus in play, or do you think a real sign of recovery? Like this is going to be the beginning of the recovery for ETH?
All this can be undone or changed if CCP undoes scarcity, which apparently after the war, something they plan to revert certain changes or change it, change what used to be scarcity.
What the holdup is? I mean, they said that they promised light at the end of the tunnel back in December. They said it again in their recent discussion. There must be some kind of bottleneck. Maybe it's harder to code than they had anticipated. Maybe they're doing an extra thorough round of quality assurance. I mean, we can only speculate, but we're surely due for some big ecology changes sooner rather than later. I mean, they basically swore on a stack of Bibles that it was going to be by the end of the year, right? They said scarcity firmly ends in the fourth quarter. But they have a whole list of things that was going to include, like carrier ratting anomalies, increase the abundance of all resources in space, mining ship overhauls. They were talking about doing that stuff a year ago. So they must have hit some kind of bottleneck. I do believe that those changes are coming. They've said so many times that they don't believe that earning is in the place that it needs to be. They have to be working on it. But it takes time. This is a complicated gaming product it has to be one of the most complicated gaming products anywhere. And, it's hard. So, no, I don't think it's a sign of fundamental recovery. Some of the things that were exerting downward pressure on the economy before, like the easing of COVID restrictions and the summer slump, those things are lifting. Of course, the war wasn't really that exciting, and so that was a motive for people to not sub their accounts. So some of that downward pressure is being alleviated, but the fundamental problem is still there. There's not enough value in space. CCP's acknowledged that. They've said they're working on it, and any given Tuesday there could be monster patch notes that fix all our problems.
I think
that lead to that true recovery. Let me say that.
We can take a look at the velocity of ISK. That is recovering from what appears to be an all-time low slump. This chart only goes back to September 2019.
That can also easily be the stimulus, right? We put a lot of ISK into the game. People want to buy a lot of things, right? So ISK moving is very normal. Say, I think we'll be expecting those kind of stuff when you put like, I don't know, 1.5 trillion or 1 point some trillion ISK into the game, right? So
yeah, but people spent the stimulus checks now. Off. And
the stimulus.
And this is not a loan. This is a free ISK, literally deposited into your bank account.
Yeah, and space is still pretty barren, just like it was before, right? So that underlying drag on the economy is still there.
Oh my God, that stimulus screws up everything.
And to that patch note, I think we're expecting, Q3 to drop. I think anytime, it should be anytime now. I think people were saying it should be beginning of August, but we're, more than halfway through August, and we're still not seeing that, video or the death walk that we're expecting to something.
We will be 3/4 of the way through the year in about 2 weeks. So
oh my God, any moment now, Benjamin Button, come on.
Maybe we'll just not have a fourth quarter. I mean, see, to me, this suggests that there's some kind of difficulty with the programming or with the design or some kind of. I mean, they've acknowledged that there's a problem with the economy. They said that repeatedly. So it's not that they're not working on it, but it's tough, and sometimes unexpected delays happen. I know it's tough to ask for patience after we've already been through 2 years, a year and a half, something like that, of this. But I don't know. The solution will get here when it gets here. Eventually, if it takes long enough, they're probably going to have to do another stimulus just to keep things chugging along. It depends on how bad the delay is, right?
No, thank you. No,
you don't want to blow up your spaceships more? Why not?
No, man, no. The stimulus has already screwed up all these charts. Everything we're analyzing is bogus information.
You can go
it is artificial.
I don't know, a Marauder or whatever. Well, what did you say?
That's what I asked. Right, that's the first question that I asked, right, during the MER analysis. Is this a stimulus from the CCP, or is this a real sign of recovery? Right, this should be the questions that should be going through this discussion, right? We're always trying to figure out, is this, are we really into the zone of recovering, or this just a temporary thing? I mean, we will see the answer, I think, in this month of MER, right, in August. If that thing starts to dive down, that means this just a stimulus, is temporary. But if this thing continue or even grow higher or even a bit flatter, but it's still growing, then maybe this is a real sign of recovery.
Well, so we don't have to choose between rival explanations when we try to understand complicated historical situations like an economy, right? There's no one thing that accounts for the direction of the economy at any given moment. There are some factors that are exerting downward pressure on the economy. There are others exerting upward pressure, and the actual direction that we see in the data depends on which of those combinations of forces is stronger. But we don't have to say, well, it's either the stimulus or it's a renewed economic activity. There was renewed economic activity because of the stimulus. There were also people logging back in to move their capital ships out of Delve for the end of the war. Well, that drove a lot of spending of isotopes, for example. I mean, that's real economic activity. They're not rival explanations. The challenge is to figure out which one is the most important. Or the challenge rather is to unravel and to give proper weight to each one of the factors in play. So I don't think that it's not a full recovery. We're not out of the woods. The fundamental problem is that the space is still too barren to properly incentivize PvE. But the stimulus is something that CCP could do right away. So they They probably looked at their production schedule. I speculate they looked at their production schedule and said, it's going to be another couple weeks at least. Better do something now while we can. Let's give people some cash, right?
Yeah. So maybe let me rephrase that, right? It's going to be if next month the velocity of it start to die down, that means the stimulus was a bigger part of the uptick than the real recovery. If it keeps going up, that means the real recovery is here alongside with the stimulus that CCP put into the game.
Well, there will be multiple factors next month, just like there are for this month and for the one before, and we'll still have that challenge. It will be a good sign. I hope to see more recovery. I look at the markets every day for my trading stuff, and what I'm seeing right now is that things are slowing down a bit, and that the effect of the stimulus is wearing off. So I'm not expecting that big upward trend of velocity of ISK to continue the way it has been. I can see in my own wallet balance, I can see that people are buying more or less, and I can tell they're buying less, at least of the stuff that I sell, than they were a week or two ago. It's not a new depression. It's not as bad as it was, but, things are slowing down a bit. I expect it'll be a gradual recovery for the next week, for the next MER, but nothing dramatic like we're seeing here, barring new action from CCP. If they drop their ecosystem update in 6 days, then what I just said is out the window.
We can see this is the. Let me just slide across to double check on the title. Oh, and my computer. Give me a moment. And this will be shall we finish it up on the money supply? Total risk available to all characters. There we can see the stimulus at its finest work. And this would also, this relates to accounts logging in and probably the doubt of a lot of things being purchased, money entering the economy, money leaving the economy because people log in, people need to move their supers, people start subbing, and then all these charts totally mucked up, in my opinion, because of the stimulus.
Part of the reason I'm optimistic about a recovery, a modest recovery coming up, is that you can see the PCU numbers. You're also seeing that recovery, right? PCU has recovered about half of the value that it had lost in May and June. So that, some of that is just people logging in to get their supers out. Nobody was logging in to pick up their stimulus checks, I'll tell you that. So, some of that is going to wear off, but some of it is just the natural cycle of people not logging in during the summer. I think we're out of the worst of it for the scarcity related and other factors related PCU slump. That was in May and June. We seem to be past that point, but there's no reason to expect, colossal growth in the next MER. Not that I know anyway.
Yeah, and also we have to remember the stimulus not only referring to free ISK that you get from CCP, but also the tax reduction that we have seen, right? We have seen the tax was going way down. That means a lot of people are more willing to sell their stocks. Either it's going to be minerals, it's going to be ships, or whatever that they have in their hangar.
Yeah, that's true. Also, every one of these events that they do that has significant value in space is, in effect, a stimulus. Like the Amar event didn't have any PvE sites for people to go run, but the Minmatar one did. That's when you started to see the recovery in the PCU numbers, when people wanted to go run those sites. So people could go out and do that. You have to count those PvE-driven events as part of as stimulus events as well.
Is there anything else that we failed to cover with the MER? No? Then let's conclude it. I'll conclude it with, for the next MER, we should probably look at the regions that the remnants of Legacy will be moving to. I want to take a look at, I think Germinator's worth looking at, Outer Passage is worth looking at, somebody is getting scolding past to my knowledge, so those will definitely be worth looking at. And I've got my eyes on Esoteria. Don't muck this up, Shen. You go see the economy.
What? I mean, there gonna be a lot of regions that Pappy's gonna move through. That's gonna have like a lot more bigger import and export numbers than.
Hey, I'll be looking at the ratting numbers too. You know.
It's gonna top us.
I need.
There's no question after that.
Well, I'm gonna look at ratting numbers and mining numbers. I need people to hunt. But is there anything else?
Well, wasn't there a battle in Esoteria?
We covered that earlier.
Yeah, we just covered that. Yeah, so.
Alrighty.
So I see Asteroth in chat saying faction warfare is worth looking at. I think the problem with next month is a lot of super is going to move through a lot of Nullsec areas, so that may stir up a lot of the MER numbers with import exports and let's say supers dying or things like that, right? So destruction numbers and things like that will get somewhat messed up by the move ups, since I mean it kind of started right at the beginning of the month. I think they're trying to conclude that at the end of the month, so it's going to be like a perfect thing to look at through the MER.
Well, until next time, this was Talking in Stations. Thank you to Shen and Savad for helping me analyze this MER.
Yep.
And
all right, have a good night, everyone.
Have a good night, and I still am Rich Richmond, your host, and we'll see you next time.